"Sir, I'm going to need you to take your seat immediately, or you may be removed when we land." The young man froze, eyes wide, still gripping the carry-on he had begged for help with since boarding. 2 rows up, Malik Rhodes pressed record, because this wasn't just rudeness anymore. It was the moment everything changed. Malik Rhodes didn't look like trouble. He wasn't flashy, wasn't loud. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. A charcoal blazer over a white dress shirt, slacks, pressed crisp leather shoes polished just enough to catch the overhead lights at a glance. He walked through Dallas Love Field that Tuesday morning with a measured pace, his brown leather briefcase hanging at his side. The gate sign read, Flight 265 to Seattle. First-class boarding had just been called. Malik stepped into the priority lane, waiting his turn behind a couple in matching gray hoodies and college sweatpants who were casually sipping their iced coffees and scrolling their phones. The gate agent smiled wide, scanned their tickets without a pause, and waved them through. Then it was his turn. Malik stepped forward, offered a polite smile, and handed over his boarding pass. The agent, blonde, mid-40s, tight ponytail, eyes already tired, looked down at the screen, then up at him, then back down again. She didn't smile, didn't scan the pass. "Are you sure this is your seat, sir?" she asked, louder than necessary. Malik kept his tone neutral. "Yes, ma'am. Seat 2A, first class." She didn't move, just stared at the screen, blinked twice. "I just need to double-check something," she said finally. "Can you step aside for a moment?" There it was, the pivot. Polite on the surface, sharp underneath. Malik had seen it a dozen different ways in a dozen different places. He nodded one and stepped aside. The line behind him kept moving. A man in a trucker hat chuckled at something on his phone and scanned through without a glance. A young woman in leggings and a messy bun breezed past with a yoga mat slung over her shoulder. No questions, no pauses. Just Malik, now off to the side, being quietly appraised like someone standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. He glanced at his watch. 10:27 a.m. Not late, not early, right on time. The agent made a call, turned her back. Malik didn't flinch. He'd blocked off the day for this flight. If anything, delays only deepened the audit he was here to conduct. He adjusted the strap of his briefcase, not out of nerves habit. He could feel eyes drifting toward him, then sliding quickly away. The older gentleman with the tablet, the woman whispering to her husband, the sighs, the side glances, the invisible courtroom that passengers create in the silence of an airport terminal. He'd lived it before, but today he was documenting it. Another agent approached, younger redhead, uncertain eyes. She walked up with a clipboard and a smile that didn't quite settle on her face. "I'm sorry, sir," she said. "We're just having a little trouble verifying your seat assignment." Malik stayed composed. "What exactly are you verifying?" The original agent jumped in. "It's just not showing up in the system under your name. Probably a mix-up. Happens sometimes." Malik reached out calmly and took back his boarding pass. Malik Rhodes, Seat 2A, TSA pre-check. Booked directly through the airline. The second woman nodded quickly. "It's probably just a system glitch. We'll confirm with a supervisor. Won't be long." Another nod from Malik. Another step back. Another glance from a stranger. From behind him, someone muttered, "Knew this would happen," loud enough to sting. Malik didn't respond. Didn't need to. He'd spent 20 years learning when silence said more than anger ever could. He opened his briefcase just a fraction, tapped his agency-issued phone awake with his thumb, and quietly began a new note. No one knew who he was. That's how he liked it. After 6 minutes and 38 seconds, he was keeping count. A third staff member emerged from the jet bridge. This one older. Steel gray hair, pressed uniform, no nonsense. She didn't ask questions, just took the boarding pass, looked at the screen, tapped a few keys, squinted and said, "Seat 2A, paid upgrade, booked direct, confirmed." Then she turned to Malik. "You're clear to board, no apology, no acknowledgement of the scrutiny, the waiting, the embarrassment. Just permission to move forward." Malik didn't thank her, just nodded and stepped ahead. The man with the golf cap in the waiting area leaned over to his buddy. "Guess he's legit after all," he said, smirking. Malik heard it. Let it pass. That was the thing about microaggressions, they came dressed in normalcy. The original gate agent caught up to him as he entered the jet bridge. "We just want to make sure everyone's in the correct seat," she offered, her voice now saccharine casual. "You understand?" Malik paused. Do you say that to every first-class passenger? She blinked. Well, it's just protocol. Then you may want to update your protocol, he replied, stepping aboard. Inside, a flight attendant gave him a quick nod and pointed toward his seat. 2A, right this way, sir. Malik placed his briefcase gently beneath the seat in front of him and settled in. The leather was soft, the air cool, but none of it dulled the tight rope of awareness stretching across his shoulders. Across the aisle, a young man in a Patagonia fleece glanced over, then looked away quickly. That was always how it went. They questioned you in public, then ignored you in silence. He reached into his blazer pocket and removed his phone again. Began typing. Subject flight 265 DAL to C. Time 10:34 a.m. Incident boarding obstruction without cause. Detail flight crew questions seat validity without confirming in system. Supervisor confirmed within 30 seconds. Delay 6 min 38 C. Tone patronizing. Passenger reaction mocking. He locked the screen. Set the phone on the tray table. Outside the window, baggage crews moved like ants. Inside the cabin buzzed with low conversation, carry-on zippers, overhead bins. A boy bumped his backpack into an elderly man's knees and didn't say sorry. A young woman removed her shoes, propped her socks on the seat in front of her. No one said a word. The plane filled, the doors closed, and Malik watched it all. Not just as a passenger, but as a witness, as a mirror, as the quiet eye the system never saw coming. The wheels had barely left the runway when Malik Rhodes leaned slightly into the window, watching the Dallas skyline recede beneath a curtain of morning haze. The seat around him was comfortable enough, wide leather-polished tray, a glass of champagne he hadn't touched, but the tightness in his chest hadn't lifted. Not from nerves, from knowing exactly what he'd walked into. This wasn't just a flight, it was a test. Of the system, of the staff, of the passengers who watched and didn't speak. And the test had started failing before his feet even left the ground. He adjusted the crease of his pants, glanced around the first-class cabin, and tapped his agency phone awake again. He scrolled back to his note on the gate incident, rereading it, line by line, then opened a fresh file. His fingers hovered for a second over the keyboard as the plane leveled out, then began Flight 265 in-air observations to follow. A toddler began to cry faintly in the rows behind, soft at first, then louder. Malik heard a voice gently cooing, Spanish female, older, trying to soothe the child. A few minutes later, movement caught his eye. A woman, maybe late 50s, brown skin, short gray curls, tucked under a floral scarf, stood at the front of the economy section, cradling the now fussy toddler. She wasn't asking to sit in first class, just standing in the aisle, gently bouncing the baby on her hip for a moment of calm. Before Malik could even process the scene, a red-headed flight attendant, same one from the boarding gate, appeared from the galley. "Ma'am, this is the first-class cabin," she said, her voice, sharp eyes scanning for an exit. "You need to return to your seat." The woman blinked. "I'm not trying to sit," she replied softly, still rocking the child. "Just calming him down, that's all." "You're blocking the aisle." The attendant snapped louder this time, already drawing glances. "Please return to your seat immediately." The woman's shoulders slumped. "Sorry," she murmured, turning slowly and carrying the now whimpering toddler back toward Coach. Malik watched her retreat in silence. 2 rows later, a white teenage boy in athletic socks wandered up from Coach, leaned over the aisle divider, and began chatting casually with someone in first class. No one said a word to him. The attendant from earlier walked by, gave him a passing glance, and kept moving. Malik typed passenger 19C female Latino, denied brief stay in first class to calm infant. White male approx 16 to 18 entered first class, not addressed. Disparate enforcement of aisle access. 20 minutes passed. Malik accepted a bottle of water from a male attendant who seemed more neutral, pleasant even. But the redhead reappeared soon after. She smiled stiffly, looked at the manifest in her hand, and feigned politeness. "Can I get you anything, mister?" "Rhodes, just water, thank you," Malik replied. "And thank you for your patience earlier," she added, fake warmth dripping through her tone. "We had a little tech hiccup at the gate. Happens all the time." Malik studied her face. "Does it?" Her smile flickered. "Excuse me." "The hiccup," he said. "Did it happen to the passengers ahead of me or?" "Well, we just follow the system, sir." Malik didn't press further. He didn't need to. He sipped the water and kept typing. Patterns. Tone shifts. Body language. Who gets the benefit of the doubt? Who gets policy? Another commotion unfolded 2 rows behind him. A young black man, maybe mid-20s, clean-cut with a faded denim jacket, stood up partially in the aisle, holding a carry-on bag awkwardly in both hands. His voice was low but firm. "Excuse me," he said to the passing flight attendant. Again the redhead. "I've tried this bin, and that one, they're both packed. Can someone help me stow this up front?" The attendant didn't stop. "Sir, you need to take your seat. We'll assist when we can." "But I've been trying since I boarded," he said, still polite, but clearly growing frustrated. "That's not my problem, is it?" She snapped back, her tone instantly colder. Malik leaned slightly forward. There it was. The shift. The moment when customer service turned into something else. "I just need help," the young man said. "That's all." The attendant shook her head. "If you continue to block the aisle or ignore instructions, we'll have to notify the captain." Malik's hands moved quickly now. He activated the voice record feature on his agency phone and let it run silently on his lap. The young man looked around, eyes searching for anyone to intervene. But passengers avoided his gaze. One woman opened her book again. A man adjusted his headphones. No one said a word. The man exhaled and slowly sat back down, wedging the carry-on between his feet. The attendant marched away. Malik tapped row 21, male black, approx 24, requested assistance with stowing carry-on. Rebuffed. Threatened with escalation. No help offered. Tone dismissive. Neighboring passengers silent. He closed his eyes for a moment. Not to rest, but to anchor. This wasn't new. He'd watched this exact story unfold in dozens of variations. Same sequence, different faces. Requests ignored. Help delayed. Labels assigned. Later, as the meal cart rolled down the aisle, the same young man was passed by once then again. Only when he flagged down another attendant, this one older with silver hair and a quiet steadiness, did someone finally stop. "Can I get a water?" he asked. "Of course," the older man replied. "Sorry about that." Small moment, but not small at all. Malik logged the interaction. The red-headed flight attendant returned a while later with a tray. "Complimentary upgrade," she announced, placing a meal in front of Malik with forced cheer. "Thank you for your loyalty." He didn't respond, just nodded and let the silence linger. The tray sat untouched. It wasn't about the food. It was about what followed after the treatment. Once the problem is neutralized, the kindness begins. 2 rows up, the teenager with the socks kicked off his shoes, stretched his legs and received an extra soda from a passing attendant, unsolicited. Malik made a note. Then across the aisle, a well-dressed man in his 60s leaned slightly toward him. Gray blazer, tennis tan, Rolex wrist. He smiled politely. "Didn't mean to eavesdrop," he said quietly, "but I saw what happened back at the gate. Bit ridiculous if you ask me." Malik met his gaze. "Appreciate that. It wasn't the first time. You fly often, often enough." Malik waited a beat, then slowly reached inside his jacket and pulled out a badge. Not flashy, not gold-plated. Just clean federal credentials with his name and agency. The man blinked. "You're conducting an unannounced audit," Malik confirmed. "Civil Rights Division, aviation compliance." The man sat back slightly, eyebrows raised. "Well, damn." "Exactly," Malik said. "We don't do this for drama. We do it for the ones who go unseen." The man nodded slowly this time. "I hope someone reads the report." "They will," Malik said, already logging the exchange. Outside the window, the sun hit the wing just right and flashed white against the clouds. Malik watched it for a moment, then turned back toward the aisle. The curtain between first class and coach shifted every few minutes, opening briefly to expose what most of the front cabin never saw. Behind that curtain, voices still rose and fell. The flight rolled on. But Malik's work was just beginning. The plane had just started its slow descent over the outskirts of Seattle, when Malik Rhodes powered off his agency phone, leaned back in his seat, and took one last glance around the first-class cabin. Passengers were adjusting their seat backs, gathering their things, checking their phones for service bars that hadn't returned yet. The curtain to coach had been drawn for the final time, sealing off the view, but not the memory. The weight of everything he'd seen during the flight, the mother in row 19 turned away for simply rocking a child, the young man in 21 scolded for asking for help. The long, looping silence of complicity all sat squarely in the center of his chest, like gravity thickening with altitude loss. Malik didn't need another dramatic blow-up, another passenger meltdown caught on camera to prove the point. What he just witnessed was quieter, more dangerous, the kind of pattern that flew under the radar, but left scars nonetheless. As the plane touched down with the soft jolt of wheels meeting wet runway, the cabin broke into that awkward ripple of post-landing applause, a mix of habit and nervous relief. Malik didn't join in. He simply reached into his blazer, pulled out his secure device, and tapped open the encrypted note app. He typed a simple header, Flight 265, final summary. Then as the engines hummed and the seatbelt sign stayed lit, his thumbs moved in a calm rhythm. Observed multiple instances of selective enforcement of policy, disproportionate scrutiny toward passengers of color, differential tone in service interactions, unequal access to assistance and failure of surrounding passengers to intervene in visible moments of bias. Collected timestamps, audio recordings, passenger row data, and direct crew exchanges. Flight staff unaware of audit. No escalation initiated by subject investigator. When the seatbelt sign dinged off, passengers surged into the aisle, grabbing overhead bags and coats, some exchanging stiff pleasantries, others already on their phones. Malik remained seated watching, letting the moment breathe. The red-headed flight attendant passed by once more, her earlier cheer, now stripped to something more cautious. She didn't say a word this time, just gave a small nod, one that asked for things to be left alone. Malik didn't return it. Instead, he rose, retrieved his briefcase, and stepped into the aisle behind the same young man from row 21. The carry-on was still wedged awkwardly beneath the seat, scuffed and misshapen from having been jammed into a space too small. The young man knelt, struggling to angle it out without bumping the passengers around him. His face was tired, not from the flight, but from the long work of swallowing frustration to avoid being labeled a problem. Malik said nothing but gave him a glance. A look that said, "I saw it all." The young man returned it, gave the slightest nod back. Nothing more. They exited separately. In the terminal, the air felt colder, sharper. People scattered to connecting gates, family embraces, business calls. Malik stepped aside near a quiet wall, pulled out his personal phone this time, and opened a second notepad. This one wasn't for the report. This one was just for him. He wrote, "Seattle bias confirmed. Consistent pattern observed. Crew escalation silent but telling. Passenger responses neutral to indifferent. Fatigue of targeted passengers evident. Language of discrimination whispered, not shouted." He saved the note, exhaled, then headed toward the escalators. He didn't look back. Within 48 hours, the official report was filed with the U.S. Department of Transportation. Audio clips were scrubbed for clarity. Time logs matched against the flight manifest. The video file, a low-angle recording of the aisle argument in row 21, was trimmed and submitted as Exhibit C. No names were public. No press release was issued. But the wheels turned. The airline received a formal notice requesting an internal policy audit. Within days, a supervisor reviewed staffing assignments. The red-headed flight attendant was quietly pulled from the rotation. Later, she resigned. 2 others on the crew were flagged for retraining. It didn't make the news. It wasn't supposed to, but one line was added to the updated first-class service manual. Staff are expected to remain aware of unconscious bias in all boarding and in-flight interactions, particularly seat verification and service response. It sat quietly between policy points about beverage service and gate departure times. A sentence that sounded like compliance, but carried the weight of someone finally paying attention. Malik never looked for headlines. He looked for movement. Back in his small office in Silver Spring, Maryland, a week later, he sat at his desk, sipping strong black coffee. The room lit only by the gray daylight filtering through the blinds. His laptop was open, but the screen had gone to sleep. On the bookshelf across the room sat a framed photo of his grandmother, her face soft, strong, wise in that Sunday morning kind of way. He remembered what she used to say when he was young and trying to understand why people treated him differently, why teachers asked to see his hall pass twice, why security guards always watched him walk through stores, but never anyone else. She'd say, "Baby, don't raise your voice, raise your standard, but never let them make you think you imagined it." That stayed with him. Still did. He opened his notebook again and scribbled one last line at the bottom of the audit's personal file. Bias doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes it wears a name tag, smiles, and calls it policy. He shut the notebook, closed his laptop, and stared for a long minute out the window, not at anything in particular, just at the world going by. A woman walking her dog, a delivery truck pulling into a driveway, a teenage kid dragging a trash bin to the curb. Regular life. The kind of ordinary rhythm that people like Malik quietly fight for. The right to move through public space without being treated like an exception, to ask for help without being punished for it, to exist without apology. His phone buzzed. A message from Colleen, the audit director. 265 flagged for internal review. Seattle route under watch. You were right. That was all he needed. Not praise, not press. Just proof. Documented, undeniable. And one more flight where silence would no longer be a shield. Malik stood up, poured the last of his coffee, and glanced once more at the photo of his grandmother. He thought of the woman in 19C still holding that squirming baby. The young man in row 21 still probably wondering if he'd done something wrong. And all the people who stayed quiet because they didn't know how to speak or because they were afraid. He didn't blame them, not fully, but he also didn't excuse it. Silence might keep the peace, but it never changed the outcome. He picked up his pen and wrote a final line at the top of his private page, a line he'd used before, but this time meant even more. To anyone who's ever been stared at for taking up space you rightfully paid for, you're not imagining it, and you're not alone. He underlined it once, then twice, then got back to work. Because the stories don't end when the plane lands. That's just when the reporting begins. In today's story, we followed Malik Rhodes, a calm, observant federal investigator, through a routine flight that was anything but routine. From the moment he was questioned at the gate to the silent bias witnessed mid-flight, Malik showed us something powerful, that injustice doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it shows up with a smile, a delay, a quiet refusal, a look that says, you don't belong here. And yet, through it all, Malik never raised his voice. He raised his standard. He didn't confront, he documented. He didn't explode, he observed. And in doing so, he revealed a truth that too many try to deny, that inequality is often quiet but deeply rooted. The most important lesson in this story isn't just about race or policy. It's about awareness, about seeing what others pretend not to see. Malik didn't stand up and call out the flight crew in public. He didn't need to. His power came from knowing that real change isn't always loud, it's consistent. It's strategic. It's choosing to act with purpose even when you're tired. If you've ever been made to feel out of place in a space you rightfully earn, whether it was a seat, a job, or a room, you're not imagining it. You're not being too sensitive. You're seeing something that others may choose to ignore. And just like Malik, you have the right to notice, to speak, or to document until the system has no choice but to listen. To those who stood by and said nothing in the story, let this be a reminder. Silence is a choice too. You don't have to be aggressive to be courageous. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is ask a question, offer support, or just acknowledge what's happening. Here at US Instructive Stories, we tell these stories not for shock, but for truth. Because these are the moments that don't always make headlines, but they shape our communities, our policies, and our sense of dignity. To our listeners, thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being willing to think, to reflect, and to grow. If this story made you pause, made you remember something, or made you see the world a little differently, then this platform has done its job. Please consider subscribing, sharing, or simply starting a conversation with someone about what you heard today. The more we speak about these stories, the harder they become to ignore. And as always, remember this: stay calm, but never stay silent.